Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a podcast where we are exploring the books that are on our shelves and how those intersect with our passions, potential, and purpose in life. We are exploring the book called Coach Wooden by Pat Williams, The 7 Principles That Shaped His Life and Will Change Yours. If you're joining for the first time, we're taking deep dives into these 7 principles. Today, we are in part 2 of principle number 3, which is make each day your masterpiece. Now, if you didn't listen to the last episode, I hope that you'll go back and listen, subscribe, share, and even send us your comments and thoughts. But when we ended that last episode, there were a couple of stories that I really had hoped that Sam would be able to share with us. So I think before we start today on the section number 2 of this principle, Sam, why don't you share with the listeners what some of those stories were that we were closing our conversations around preparation.
Yeah, we were talking about preparation, and it was 2 specific quotes. So we were talking about how every practice is planned down to the minute, and when you're preparing, and the person who gave the quote, who was Pete Blackman, that played for one of Coach Wooden's team, he said, "You don't lose track of lessons like that. When you're preparing for a major business presentation 15 years later, you look around and you're probably the best prepared person there." And the story that struck me was when I first started in leadership, I worked for a VP who he ran the organization with this very strict quarterly leadership meeting cadence. Every quarter you had a meeting, and there was a slide deck that was the template, and it was all of the conversations that we wanted to have. It was a look back on the quarter and a look ahead. Pretty common, QBR, quarterly business review type of thing. But this meeting was, I've never prepared harder for meetings in my life. And this was really, really early on in my leadership career because everybody felt such pressure for this meeting. But it was the good kind of pressure, I think. I don't know, maybe other people might disagree. But it was that he's going to ask us a lot of questions. He's going to ask us things that we better know the answers to in that moment. And so you would spend weeks preparing for these meetings, but the result of it was, and then when I worked for other leaders down the road who didn't have, maybe any, quarterly structure or anything like that, I realized I really missed it because the result of all this preparation was really good meetings that then allowed us to have really good conversations, bring up the problems that we had, bring up the things that are keeping us from the goals that we set, or talking about changing the goals and things like that. And this hyper preparation got us ready for great conversation that really led to great results. And so then what you could watch is this quarter over quarter. I could go back through the slide decks and say, I can see how we've grown. I can see how things have changed. And that was great later on. Heck, it was great when I went to update my resume and I was like, oh, we can see how the business has grown, how the results have changed and what that looks like. But it all came down to this weeks and weeks and weeks of preparation. And it was just one of my favorite things. But, I think that was such a strong lesson for me. And when I read that part of that book, I was like, oh man, this is so, so very true. And I've seen the difference. I think we all have in meetings where we really prepared for versus meetings that weren't very well prepared for. And Denise, you've got a funny mug about it's that internet meme about being in a meeting that could have been an email.
Yeah, I know that we're probably not doing a video of this. We're doing an audio, but in case, Scott, if you grab this was a gift from my kids because they knew what my life was like for all of the hours that I sat behind my desk. And it says, I survived another meeting that should have been an email. So I can tell you that was definitely like the game of Survivor many times for me. But it's funny that you're telling the story about the effects that had, because it really goes down to the fact that you had set goals, right? And then you accomplished those goals. And now you were taking the results of those goals and preparing to reflect back on the success of those goals, right? So we're going to be moving into this chapter on setting goals. But if you're not prepared, you can't pivot quickly. And you had another really incredible story for that.
Exactly. Yeah, this falls into the sports world, but I was going through TikToks. I think every episode I've talked about TikTok. Apparently, I spent way too much time on it, but I learned something every time, so that's why I spend my time there. But I was going through TikToks, and I think it was college. It was either college or high school. It definitely wasn't professional, but the video was from behind the catcher. And the pitcher pitches the pitch, catcher catches it. And in one motion that I am not even sure. I watched this video probably 35 times, and I'm not sure how he did it as fast as he did it. But I think it comes back to preparation. The catcher caught the ball and in one motion threw it to the second baseman. I mean, so fast that the pitcher didn't get out of the way in time. He didn't get hit. Don't worry, calm down, he's fine. But his reaction, the pitcher's reaction, right? That thing where the ball's coming at you and you lean back out of the way. The pitcher leaned back at the moment the second baseman caught it. It was way past him. But because the catcher reacted so fast in that moment, and John Wooden's got it quoted here, and he says it a lot, but it's be quick, but don't hurry. And it really is all about that quickness comes from preparation. When you've practiced and prepared yourself well, quickness comes naturally. And I watched this video, we're preparing for this podcast, and I was like, this is it. This catcher has to have done this so many times and be prepared for, while he's catching, having to watch somebody stealing from the base from first to second to be able to react so inhumanly fast that I watched it 50 times. I showed my son and he was like, oh yeah, I know about videos where, this kind of a play happens. I was like, no, you've never seen anything like this where it's that much. But it comes back to preparation. It comes back to this quote of, you're ready for the moment, for the thing you're in when you're there, and you can't get to your goals. You can't get to the things you want to accomplish, right? Like in baseball, you want to get somebody out. That's the goal. You got to get enough outs to end the inning, end the game, but you can't get there until you're prepared. And so, setting that segue up and moving into what the goals are comes from preparation. So I like that we're starting here with recapping our last episode in this chapter, because I got to remind you that if you want to talk about goals, if you want to talk about where you want to go, and you want to talk about making a day a masterpiece, don't forget about preparation. You gotta start there. So go back and listen to that episode if you missed it. But that brings us to really today, where we're starting is around goals, and the subsection is set goals to make each day your masterpiece.
You're talking about some things that are making me think of our friend John Maxwell. John, I remember being at a conference once, and he was talking to the audience about how many of you in the audience want to be a successful speaker or coach or trainer. And 3,000, 5,000 people raised their hand, right? They all wanted that. And then he paused and he said, you don't know what I've done to get to where I am. And he said, I've been doing this for like 50 years. So until you're willing to do what I did to have what I've got, then are you really willing? And so you have to be prepared. You have to set goals, but you have to practice, and you have to sometimes go through something like you were talking the last episode, maybe a couple episodes ago. We were talking about our kids and how they all are athletes, and even ourselves growing up, we were athletes, but you didn't start out in Pee-wee football or little league baseball or on a basketball court or a soccer field as a superstar. You had to start somewhere, and you had to practice, you had to be prepared, and you had to have goals. And one of the things that strikes me as we start talking about setting goals each day, John Maxwell had a goal to be able to have some time with John Wooden. And when he was preparing for that meeting, when he was going to meet him face to face for the very first time, John prepared 6 pages of notes and questions that he wanted to ask John Wooden. And he didn't necessarily expect that John would let him ask all those questions that day when they met at the diner, but he was prepared just in case. And what ended up happening was that the goal was that John Maxwell wanted to get an entryway to be able to get a relationship with John Wooden. And while they were going through the questions, John Wooden mentioned to John Maxwell, I can't believe that you brought 6 pages of questions for me. And then he said, and I want to answer all of them. So later that day, John Maxwell had an opportunity to go to Coach Wooden's home and then not only go through all the questions, but they started a very fruitful mentorship relationship over many years. And that's also how we learned about some of these stories as well. I am not as good at this particular section on setting goals because sometimes I have intentions, but it takes more than just setting a goal. It takes achieving it. And Sam, this is something that you're just really good at and something I admire in you that I've watched you do as a leader. So tell the listeners a little bit more about this.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. So this section about setting goals, I think that Pat does a really nice job of giving you some, what does he call them? Here are some ways we can take control of today and turn this day into a masterpiece. And right before he gives you these 5 things, he talks about making it a great day. And so when we think about goal setting, I think that's one of the things that we miss often is that we can set a goal, but then we have to change it. And so the story about making it a great day comes from Pat talking to Frank Arnold. And Frank Arnold said, if you would have heard my voicemail, right, if I wouldn't have answered, you would have heard me say, make it a great day, not have a great day. And this is the perfect setup to these 5 things, because when we think about goals, what we often realize is that if you don't couple that with action, with achievement, with doing something today, because you only have today to make a masterpiece, then you really miss it. And so I think it's that change of having, right? The day comes to me, my goals come to me, rather than if I want to achieve a goal, I have to make it happen. There is nobody that can make that happen for me. And so the 5 things, and we're going to talk through all of these again, hopefully it doesn't take us too long. But the first one is setting clear goals, making measurable steps to achieving, right? Making, again, you've got to do it. So not only do you set the very clear goal, but making measurable steps. That's key. And this is the thing, I think, Denise, when you say, I think you're really good at this, this is what I think I'm really good at, is this part of it. But then the other things that take you to goal setting are, the second one is putting an end to procrastination. I'm sure everybody's interested in that topic because we all struggle with it. Be aware of distractions and time wasters, right? Where are you using your time? Make a time log and focusing on excellence, which I think we could spend 100 episodes just on excellence itself. But let's go back to that first one because we'll get to all of them. So in the first one, it's really about setting clear goals and taking measurable actions. I have a math degree, and so I'm all about measurability and making sure that, not only am I really clear on what I'm trying to achieve or what I'm trying to coach somebody to achieve, but making sure that they've got a way to measure it. And people struggle with measurability often, right? Especially when you're focusing on something a little more qualitative rather than quantitative, right? Like, I would like to be a better networker. Like, what's the quantitative measurement on networking, right? And I think we talked about this a little bit in a past episode. But so what I encourage people is I encourage them to think about sometimes that measurability, because this is how you can check yourself as you're making a clear goal and moving towards it, is to use a 1 to 10 scale on anything. You can make a feeling quantitative. You can make a qualitative feeling quantitative by just using a really simple framework around a 10-point scale. So I will have achieved this goal when I feel like I have a strong network. Again, like, what does that mean to somebody? So the next question I ask somebody is, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about the strength of your network now? What number would you assign it? And the person will be like, I don't know, 4. And I say, okay, well, where do you want to get to, right? What's reasonable? Are you trying to get to a 10? Because we got a lot of work ahead of us if we are. Or are you trying to get to like a 7 right now? What does that look like? What does that mean? And so then what you walk somebody through, or what I walk myself through in some of this, is, okay, I want to, like, 7 feels good. I don't know why. I don't have a good reason for it. Feel it in my gut. 7's where I want to be. Okay, great. What does it look like when you get to 7? What are the qualities you see around you? What does what does that environment look like? What conversations are you having with people? Get real specific. Tell me what that looks like. And then you talk about, okay, you're at a 4 and you want to get to a 7. What does a 5 look like, right? We're just going to step towards it. You don't have to get to 7 tomorrow. You got your dream. You're real clear on these goals and what that looks like, but you're not trying to get there. Let's give yourself 18 months to get there. Let's give yourself 12 months. Give yourself 6 months. What does that look like for you? What's that time frame? And then how quickly do you need to move through 5, 6 to get to 7? And so you can make these things really quantitative. And so I love that when we were reading this chapter and we started this one out, I was like, oh yes, this is the thing. If I could help everyone achieve their goals, like I will die a happy person, because there will be a lot of greatness in the world and great things, but the clarity in your goal, really getting specific on it, and then finding a way to measure it. And that's, again, where people get stuck. But you can make anything measurable. Use a 10-point scale. You got this. Like, you can figure that out. And if you can't, go get a coach. That's literally what coaching is. We help you through that. We help you think, through those things. Denise and I've spent tons of time doing this. But, when it comes down to it, it's nothing complicated. It's just that at the end of the day, it's getting real clear on those things. And focusing on that, and then not procrastinating on those things that you said, which is the next, the next thing. And Denise, I know you've got some thoughts on procrastination and some of the triggers that put you into procrastination, but triggers that take you out of procrastination too.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we even dive into that, I have to just say, you just gave us all a masterclass in coaching. So whether you are a coach listening to this and got some tips about how to lead a coaching engagement, whether you are a people leader and need to have more effective conversations with the people that report to you, whether you are someone that is looking at a challenge, an obstacle, or wanting a solution to something and needing to know what it would be like to be with a coach, that was a perfect example of a played out like a role play almost of what it would be like with someone going through a coaching engagement. When you think about goals and you think about SMART goals and what that acronym means, is it specific? Is it something that can be measured? Is it achievable? Because it might be specific and measurable, but can you really achieve it? Mm-hmm. Is it really responsible? Is it realistic? Is it really something that you can and want to do? And is it time bound? Meaning that, is it really a goal or is it a dream? Is it something that you can achieve with all those different things? And sometimes we procrastinate and we put things off that we should be doing today because of things that get distractions that come into our way. And so writing down your goals and having to-do lists, these are important to keep you on track, but also writing your dreams down, that's also important to do. Mm-hmm. In fact, we're going to have a retreat coming up this fall, 2023, depending on when you're listening to this. This fall of 2023, Sam and I will be hosting a small group private retreat in Florida, where we will be exploring how you take your priorities, your passions, your potential, your purpose, your preparation, and your results into something different in life. And so we'll continue to share that information as we get closer. But if you're listening to this episode and you want more information about that, you can follow us on our LinkedIn page, School of Thoughts Publishing, or you can email us at info@schoolofthoughts.net. And we'd love to share more information about that. It's going to be limited to just a small group of people. And Sam, I know that we're so excited to be able to bring that to life.
I'm super excited on that. And that's that, to bring something like that to life, right? That was a dream that you had. And, I jumped on thinking, oh, that'd be great. And let's set a goal. Let's figure out, like, we've been doing this. We've been coaching each other through these moments of what do we need to do to bring something like that to life. And people look at things like that and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you can do that. And in reality, it's achievable just through, goal setting and through making things happen. But it also has been, we got to stop procrastinating on, some things and really getting down to what that is. And this section of the book talks about do it now, do it now, do it now, right? It reminds me of how this chapter kicked off. There's no time like right now. You don't, time is the most precious thing that you have. And you only technically have right now in this moment that you're in. And, there's that do it now. Nike slogan is just do it, right? Just do it now, do it now, do it now. And I think that, I don't know, we always have good intentions in life that we're going to do things right now, right? I'm going to work out today. I'm going to do whatever. But I don't know, to me, it's sometimes when we hit big things in our life, right? And Denise, I've talked about this a million times. I've both been through just some crazy things that most people don't have to go through in their lives and things like that. But sometimes when you hit those big moments, you hit something that really triggers you into living in the right now. And that can be the thing that pushes you past not doing it now. And I know that, you've got a really incredible story on that topic. And how do you get out of procrastination and do it now? And what are the triggers that sometimes make us do that?
Yeah, there's a quote that says something like, you may not be able to do everything, but you can do something.
Mm-hmm.
There's an awesome song by an amazing songwriter. I hope I can convince him to come be a guest with us one day, Josh Wilson. He has a song that says, I refuse to do nothing.
I love that.
You have to do something. You can just do something. In fact, Matthew West, another amazing songwriter, he says, just right now, do something. Like, make the story of your life matter. Just do something. And so the retreat idea came from that. It was a dream, and we did something about it. We started writing down and holding each other accountable and taking steps and putting people and process in place. Well, the book says, Pat Wooden's book says, if you're going to write the great American novel, then write it. Don't put it off until everything is just so. Just do it, like you're saying, Sam. Just do it. And so last November, I got terrible news from a very close, dear heart friend of mine who I went to college with, and she found out that she was diagnosed with a pretty aggressive cancer. And what I noticed as she was sharing this news with us the week before Thanksgiving was that she was thankful. And she was expressing quality of life, and not that it was over, but that she was going to live and make all of her moments matter the most. And to this day, I try to write to her every single day, and I either share a thought or a song or a prayer with her. And she, through this diagnosis, has made me a significantly better person. Absolutely, hands down, bar none. Her obstacle became an opportunity for me to be a better person. And thank God she's actually doing a lot better now. And we continue to pray for her to have some good diagnosis. And if you're a praying person and you listen to this podcast, her name is Wendy. I would love for you to pray for her and pray for her sweet, precious family. But what happened that week as well was that I started thinking about what is something that I've wanted to do that I've put off because tomorrow isn't promised. And I was watching this process my friend was enduring and thinking to myself, how easy is it just to put something off? Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. Oh, I'll do it next year. Oh, I'll do it when I get a different job or when my kids grow up or when I move or when I have more money or whatever the excuses are that we put on ourselves. And so there was something that I'd been working on for 4 years. I was putting out these sprinkled posts on my Facebook page about my thoughts of the lyrics of the song, The 12 Days of Christmas, the partridge in a pear tree. And every year that I would put these posts out, I had this wonderful accountability friend, my friend Yvette. She would write to me and say, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to turn this into a book? When are you going to create this into a book? When am I going to read this as a book? And year after year, I was just not being brave, and I just wasn't pulling the trigger, and I wasn't doing it. And yet in my passion planner that I talked about last time, I had a goal in there that said, I want to publish a book. And so I thought to myself, I hadn't yet really reflected on this chapter that we're talking about today, but in this process in November, as I was going through my own growth journey, I thought I have to do this. I have to do this. It was the week before Thanksgiving. Sam, I never took time off of work when we had our jobs. I never did. And yet I would find myself at the end of the year with all this stacked up time and often just leaving it on the table because I never took time for myself. And so I had all this banked up time and I thought, you know what? I'm going to take the week of Thanksgiving off. I'm going to invest in learning what it's going to take to publish this book once and for all. And I found myself staying up until like 2 o'clock in the morning every night, researching Amazon videos about how to publish with them and Barnes and Noble's videos, how to publish with them. How do you edit a book? How do you format a book? That's actually what became School of Thoughts Publishing. So it became a company before I even knew I was going to need a company, because back then I didn't know that we were yet going to be displaced from our jobs. But I knew that I needed to write this book before and publish it before the end of that particular weekend in order to have it published by December 1st, because the 12 Days of Christmas is a Christmas book. So I put myself in something that was very specific, very measurable. It was achievable. Was it realistic? I didn't really know until I put my head down. It became very realistic, and it was very time sensitive to be able to do this. So I did everything that I needed to do. I uploaded the book literally 5 minutes before midnight on the deadline. I held my breath, and as soon as I clicked send, oh my gosh, Sam, I thought to myself, like in slow motion, oh no, I uploaded the wrong version. I uploaded the complete wrong version of the book. Oh my God. So then I had to call Amazon, and in the middle of the night, I'm talking to this Amazon person, and I said, how do I take the book down? How do I take the book down? I can't get the right version to upload. And the lady paused for a second, and then she said, you know what? You can't do anything about it. You have to wait until the book publishes on December 1st before you can remove it and then publish the edited version of it. So I asked her, what time does the book typically publish? And she said that it could happen anywhere between like 4 and 6 a.m. So don't you know, the night before December 1st, I'm up at like 3 a.m. I'm twiddling my fingers on the desk. I'm bleary-eyed watching the clock, refreshing my screen every 5 seconds to see this book pop up. And when it popped up, I was able to go in and put the new version of the book in. So then I let it go. I had to release that and just let it go. And a week later, a friend of mine called me up and she said, Denise, congratulations on the book. And I thought, oh, thank you. It's so very nice of you to call and let me know that. Proud of it. It's something I've been wanting to do a long time. And she said, you don't know, do you? And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, let's get on a webcam right now. So we got on a web meeting, and she opened up the Amazon page and she said, look, for the last week, your book has been a #1 release on Amazon. And I thought, man, all because something happened in my life that made me take action and I stopped procrastinating. That book has gone on to be sold on almost every continent now. I checked recently. I literally just got a payment from Amazon from Japan. I'm thinking to myself, I don't know who in Japan just bought my book in the month of May when this is a Christmas book, but I'm so super grateful. I'm grateful not only to the readers of the book, I'm grateful to the wisdom that was given to me to write the book. I mentioned about over 50 songs in the book that I got inspiration from, if you ever get a chance to check out the book. But I'm most grateful to my friend Wendy. And she didn't know it, of course, but that experience that she had to go through and endure, and that she's still enduring, was a catalyst for me to get up off my you-know-what and do something about something and stop procrastinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's those moments that, that hit you on that deep level that rip away all the reasons you've been procrastinating, right? And there's been a lot of really good research on procrastination in the last few years about what is it, right? Because we usually would equate it to laziness, oh, I'm being lazy, but that's not what procrastination is at all, right? It's really about there's something you're afraid of. There's a deeper reason you're not taking the action, right? And sometimes it's as simple as tomorrow will be there. And so therefore I'll do it. But, when you think about like, oh, I'm procrastinating on something, the thing you got to ask yourself is, why am I procrastinating? And it is not because you're lazy. It is because there's something else. You're afraid of something. You're waiting on something else to happen. You're waiting for when you get the right time. And so like beating procrastination is knowing that what is the reason you're procrastinating and moving beyond it. But when you have those moments like you had with your friend Wendy, it's that catalyst of there might not be tomorrow, right? It sounds like your reason for procrastination was I'll do it when I have time. I don't have time to do it, right? Like that incorrect thought process, because clearly you had the time when you realized what you wanted was more important than the reason you were procrastinating. And, and that's really, and look at what that accomplished, right? Look at the results of realizing you've got today. Today's got to be the masterpiece because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. And that's, right, contextually inside this book, that makes a lot of sense. And that, that really fits in. I love that, I love that you took a situation that was so negative and turned it into, right? That's just so inspiring in itself, but it's inspiring in like 50,000 different little ways I can chop it up. That's just, it's really something, something incredible. I love that.
Thank you. They're triggers, right? These are behavioral triggers. we're going to put this in the show notes. There is an incredibly good article by Marshall Goldsmith. He's an executive coach and he's also an author. Definitely check him out if you've never heard of him. And he has some great posts also on LinkedIn. He wrote an entire blog about just this chapter of this book. Make every day your masterpiece. And he talks about behavioral triggers in the article, and that a trigger can be positive or negative. It can be indirect or direct. It can be internal or external. It can be conscious or unconscious. But what are the triggers that either allow you to do something or prevent you from doing something, but that you own it at the end of the day? In fact, I wrote down something from the book that said that the quality of your day depends on you. And so if you flip that around and you say it to yourself, this quality of today, whatever day this is you're listening to this quality of your day today depends on you. And if you said that out loud, my day depends on me today. And then that would make it easier as you become distracted, because the book says that when you become aware of your distractions and time wasters, you'll have a better, more masterful day. A lot of us have learned in the last couple of years about working from home. Now, I've been working from home for more than 15 years, but for some, it was a new distraction, especially for moms of young kids or parents of young kids that were having to balance being a teacher, a principal, a lunch lady, and a maid, and working all at the same time. Working at home is hard for some people. You hear the laundry buzzing, maybe FedEx is at your door, maybe there are other distractions. Social media is a huge distraction because you can get caught in the rabbit hole of, did I get any likes, or what's newly posted out there by other people, and this link took me to another link, and all the deep links that are embedded that you could spend your entire life on. Phone notifications. I don't know if you've heard it, but a couple times in the episode, there's been these little buzzes. And so continuously the phone is buzzing and dinging. Business meetings. We talked about this last time about that have no point and they accomplish very little. How many times do we have a distraction where we're really focused on something? We're in the middle of doing something and we're getting maybe brain revelations, but then we have to go to a meeting. And that meeting, by the time you leave, you're frustrated because it was a waste of your time. Clutter is a really big distraction. Why don't you talk a little bit about this one, Sam, because we've been talking about this over the last 2 weeks together.
We have been talking a lot about clutter, and I love what you're saying about distractions and time wasters, which is number 3 thing in this section. The clutter can be such a distraction on so many different levels, right? One, it's hard to find stuff that you need, right? I think about my bookshelf as we prepare for these meetings. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, which book is this? Where is this, right? Like, I have so many things that are not in some kind of organized way, and it's like, why the books that I need and I've been referencing and thinking about a lot, well, they're in a small pile next to where I've been working most of the time. But you and I have been talking about this because I was telling you about one of my friends who had moved to a new apartment, and she had, the regular stuff when you move, piles of boxes, furniture everywhere, like nothing really set up. But she had a lot of other things going on in her life. She was trying to, find a new job and do, all this different stuff. And at one point was just like, I can't focus on doing the things I need to do, hitting the goals that I have, because mentally I'm thinking about the piece of clutter, right? The pile of stuff that I haven't gotten to yet, the things that I haven't figured out, the fact that I don't have this set up or that set up or whatever. And so when we think about distractions and time wasters, there are obvious things, right? Social media, like you said, but clutter is a really not obvious things sometimes. And it can be mental clutter. What are the things that are just in your way? What's the stuff you're not dealing with? What's that feeling in your chest that's like, oh, there's something bothering me and I haven't processed it. I haven't worked through that. And so it's become mental clutter, emotional clutter, and physical clutter around my space, and really moving beyond that. And so, that's what you and I had been. We spent, I don't know, we probably spent a whole half of one of our times talking about what clutter do we have in our life? What things do we need to do? And you had recommended a book to me on that, around clutter. And
Yeah.
You had a whole different perspective on a book I think a lot of people have heard of.
Yeah, so this book is called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. And I think we're going to do some episodes on that in the future for sure, because my mom gave me this book, and I think it was because she wanted me to clean my house. But
gotta love the mom guilt.
Yeah. So when I read the book, though, I got an entirely different perspective of it. In fact, I took a lot of the lessons in the book and turned them into some lessons that I was sharing with very senior leaders in a leadership cohort that I was teaching at the time. And sometimes cluttered, like you said, it could be from your mind, it could be around your surroundings, but it could also be people, right? Like how many people are cluttering up your calendar? I mentioned last time about how my calendar is often very full because I want to give myself, I want to add value, I want to be available to people. But you were sharing with me before we got on the recording about the ability to be able to say no to like a lot of things so that you could say yes to the best things.
Yep. Yeah, there's a quote in this chapter that says, it's okay to say no when people intrude on your time, and you don't owe anyone an apology or an excuse. And it reminds me of the saying that no is a complete sentence, right? Hey, Sam, can you do this for me? No. And I don't, and that is so uncomfortable, especially if you're a people pleaser. That is so uncomfortable to be like, hey, we want to do this. And I have a customer service background for a lot of my career. And so it was always, you can't say no, right? You can't say no to a customer. But sometimes you got to say no if you're going to really focus on your goals. This is all about goal setting, right? This is what this section's about. If you want to get to your goals, you have to say no in order to say yes, or else you don't own your time. You're not in control of really what's happening. And so you have to get really uncomfortable in the no, like you have to get really uncomfortable to get comfortable with the no, right? Like, no, I'm sorry. I wish I could do that for you, but I just don't have the time for it. And, sometimes you hedge that of, no, I can't do this, but I could do this for you. Like, no, I can't spend an hour, right? I can't spend an hour in this meeting, but I'll happily send you an email with my thoughts, right? So that you can go, make the decision or whatever. Or if you can do this for me, right? Because I can't do the meeting, but if you could send me your questions, I can write back to you when I make the time for that. And it, at the end of the week, be okay. Right. So like getting in that really uncomfortable space of shutting somebody down and knowing that no is okay. No in itself is allowed to be a complete sentence. And I've done that to people where people are like, can you do this for me? And I go, no. And then it is this awkward.
Yeah.
Silence. And then they're like, and then I watch people blossom and problem solve it themselves, right? I learned that as a leader. Sometimes when it's like, no, I won't do this for you, then they go and they find the solution themselves, and then they do it and they figure it out, and then they've grown and they've learned. And sometimes no is a gift to other people, right? Because my no is your yes. And so, yes, you can go build the skill that I already have, right? And hey, if you need help with that, let me know. But yeah, you got this. Like, no, I'm not doing it, but you got it.
Sometimes your no would be easier, I imagine, if you have a plan. Because we've talked about planning, right, and preparation, you know what your capacity for the 24 hours that you have in a day can hold.
Exactly.
And so the question for the tip number 4 is, do you really know what you do with your time? There was a suggestion about making a time log, and I actually remember, it's been many years ago now. I can't remember the name of the app, but there was a time when we were exploring this concept of how do we use our time well. And our mutual friend, Michelle King and I, we were talking about this app that she found where you could track different things that were happening in your day, whether you were being on a phone call or in a meeting or reading email. And I think a lot of it was around how much time do you waste reading and responding to emails. In fact, years ago, this has got to be probably, oh shoot, I don't know. It's got to be at least maybe a decade ago. We had this really energetic, vibrant CEO named Lars. And I think just something got like a little bug bit him this day, and he wanted us to start taking more control over quality time. And he sent an email out to the whole company, thousands of employees, and said, okay, starting today, mandatory, you're not allowed to respond to any emails until 5 o'clock. Basically, if you do, you'll be in trouble. And so we had to go through this very awkward period of time where it was getting to the point where emails were becoming like text messages, right? Somebody would write to you and you would expect they would respond immediately. And then there would be these long threads of RE, right? How many responses were on that one thread? And then sometimes you're copied on something and you're like, why am I even on this thread? So by the end of the week, I got control of my inbox. I was only responding to things that I had to respond to, and I was able to respond in a meaningful, memorable, measurable way where the person that was receiving the email knew that I put thought and time, not just reacting, but responding to the email. And managing your time is hard to do. When I very first was hired to a company years ago, a friend of mine, Sean, he said, Denise, we're going to have trouble being in this remote environment. We were new to working remotely. So this is like got to be 15 or more years ago. And he said, we're going to have to do something so that we don't get stuck sitting in a chair all day long and never standing up. Because when you're in an office, you can have a coffee break or go to the restroom or go talk to your neighbor. But when you're working at home, sometimes you put your head down and you figure out from 1 minute to the next that you just spent 12 hours without standing up. So we did this exercise where he said, all right, I'm going to challenge you because you're really bad at this, Denise. And so I'm going to make you do something unique. Get up, put a timer on your stove that will force you to have to stand up and go turn the timer off. I can't tell you how many meetings I had, Sam, where in the background, all you could hear was, bah, 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 because I wasn't standing up to go turn the timer off because now I was in another meeting. But making a time log and knowing how to use your day helps you to focus more on excellence and making your masterpiece of the day, right?
Yeah. And I love that using of tools to do that. It made me think I've got on my home screen of my phone the screen time widget that tells me how much time my screen has been on in a day, and then shows me the top 3 apps that I'm using. So when I look down and I'm like 45 minutes on Facebook, 20 minutes on Instagram, I was like, I spent an hour of my life scrolling, and then I have to think about, did I use that wisely? Did I not use that wisely? What could I have done? What should I have done with that hour? So I think utilizing tools like that helps you. I love that use the time log. I think that's such a great thing, because when you utilize a tool like a log in any kind of fashion, or a tool like a blaring alarm, it helps you just draw awareness. It reminds me of mindfulness, of just drawing awareness to what's happening, bringing you into the present. Because if you aren't aware of what's happening to you, you aren't aware of your time distractors, you aren't aware of what's going on, and you've got these goals that you set, right, bringing us through all of these pieces, you're never going to get to excellence, which is, like you said, this next part here that we're talking about. And you never get to it at all unless you say no, unless you know what's going on, unless you put the end to procrastination. So let's talk about focusing on excellence. Let's talk about what that looks like. And
So this is tip number 5. So let's recap those tips real quick. Do you have them written down that we can share?
I
Let's
do.
see.
I
I know I
do.
have them.
It's
Let's see.
the first one was setting clear goals and making measurable steps, right? Knowing where you want to go and taking action to get there, putting an end to procrastination. What is getting in your way? Why is it getting in your way? Really, understanding that about yourself. Knowing what distractions, be mindful of the distractions and the time wasters in your life, and utilize tools to make that happen by making a time log. Because if you do those things, if you've got goals, if you're taking steps to get there, if you're aware of what's getting in your way, and you're using tools to enable a good situation around you, that leads us to this 5th thing, which is focus on excellence.
Focus on excellence. So this is about maximizing the moments in your life to make your day a masterpiece, but also to have a life that's lived on purpose, with purpose. And isn't that what we expect from other people? Like, imagine going to work and telling your boss and your coworkers, oh, hey, everyone, today I think that I'm just going to strive to do less than my best. Like, that's ridiculous.
I love that.
So this is about attitude. And I heard this one time that your attitude determines your altitude. So if you have a good attitude, how far can you go with that? The book talks about a coach that had an amazing attitude, Coach Sue Enquist. She was an NCAA winning softball coach. She was really known for her infectious positive attitude. And she said that there are only 2 things you can control: your effort and your attitude. And so she also taught a really incredible lesson on something called the 33% rule. Sam, why don't you teach us a little bit about this lesson?
Yeah, this was really interesting. And I hadn't heard this before I read this book, which is interesting because normally this is an area I focus on it. I don't know, I never tripped across it. But the 33% rule, which is known as a Sueism, that's what her sayings are called. But the bottom third of people are whiners and complainers who suck the life out of you. Like, ooh, that's kind of harsh. But the middle third are people whose attitude fluctuates from positive to negative depending on the circumstance. And the top third maintain a positive attitude even in adversity. These positive people in the top third are the leaders, the achievers, the game changers, right? So when we think about excellence, this 33% rule is really about the people who have a positive attitude. Doesn't matter the situation, doesn't matter what circumstances are going on, you maintain a positive attitude even through adversity. And I know, Denise, you've got some stories and some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we'll put it in the show notes. I wrote an article about this for Forbes, actually, about how do you lead your life during times of adversity. If you don't get a chance to look at the show notes, which I suspect in any of the podcast platforms you listen to, you should see show notes. In case you don't, all you do is Google my name, Denise Russo, the word Forbes, and this word, adversity, and that article will pop up and you'll be able to see the article. But there's so much research that's out there right now on neuroscience, the science of our minds, well-being, positive intelligence. There's a great book written on positive intelligence that I was actually trained in by the author named Shirzad Shamin. So we'll reference that in the show notes. There's another book that's about the how of happiness, which was written from a science lens about how do we look in ways to being more happy. I'm actually taking a class right now from Yale University about the science of well-being, learning so much about myself and growing every day. And that's the key, really. And you're focusing on excellence. It's about what are you doing to do what we said our whole entire purpose of School of Thoughts is, right? It's exploring your passions. It's lifting the lid on and lifting up your potential by being in a state of continuous learning. And it's about really living a life of purpose, with purpose, on purpose, and having purpose. So when you think about these things in this chapter, the book said, watch how you're surrounded by the mediocre. And that really struck me because it started to make me think, what do other people think when they're surrounded by me? What do people think when I am in a room or in a conversation or in a meeting with them that they've invested that time that we talked about that will no longer come back again? It's once it's gone, it's gone. Watch how you're surrounded by the mediocre. And that got me thinking about this person that I coached a few years ago. To save the innocent, I won't share the name or anything about the details of the person, except to say that this person, Sam, was constantly negative. They would come to the coaching engagement and they would complain and they would blame and they would be so negative the whole entire time. In fact, my mom used to have a word for this. She would call them Mrs. Chandlers. She used to have a neighbor years and years ago named Mrs. Chandler. And I think Mrs. Chandler probably had a hard life, but Mrs. Chandler would call my mom with the only intention of complaining about her husband or her life or the weather.
Yeah, I think we all have Mrs. Chandlers in our lives. Right?
Yes. And I don't want to be a Mrs. Chandler. And my mom would always tell me, please, if you ever see me doing this, tell me to stop being Mrs. Chandler. Well, let's suffice to say, we're going to call this person I was coaching Mrs. Chandler because they really were Mrs. Chandler. They ended up getting to the point of self-awareness, thanks to coaching, right? Self-awareness through coaching. Coaching is not to tell you what to do, who to be, or how to be. Coaching is to help you raise your subconscious thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and turn them into conscious thoughts, beliefs, and feelings so that you can have different actions, reactions, and outcomes in your life. And so when this Mrs. Chandler person that I was coaching started getting some self-awareness, it suddenly struck them of the type of a person that they were and that they weren't taking responsibility for themselves. They weren't living a life of excellence at all. Mm-hmm. And so the person had an opportunity to take two paths. It's like the road less traveled, Robert Frost poem. In fact, that's another Forbes article I wrote. So if you Google that one, Scott, I didn't give you the link for that one, but if we can put that in the show notes, that would be great as well. But it's like basically thinking about here you are at a place in your life where you see a road fork into two ways and you have a choice. You can go left or you can go right. Well, there's probably a third choice too, which is you could just stay still and do nothing. But let's assume you take an action towards one way or the other. Well, in this case of this Mrs. Chandler person I was coaching, the choice was either to take this self-awareness and to live a life of excellence or not. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately for this person, they chose to take the path that was really worn, the path most traveled, which is for that bottom 33%, which was to do the opposite of what living a life of excellence is about. That person just continued to decide to be in a state of victim mentality instead of victorious. So the person ended up saying, I'm embarrassed by myself. I know that I'm not taking action. I'm coming to you week after week with accountability that I've done nothing about and still complaining. So I'm just going to stop having coaching. A couple years later, I wrote back to this person and I just said, hey, you were on my mind. I was thinking of you and I was just checking to see if things gotten better for you. And don't you know, Sam, no, things had stayed the same for this person. And it's such a tragedy that they weren't able to at least move into the second realm of the second 33%, where even if you're wavering in your excellence focus, depending on your circumstances in life. But remember, there's things you can control in your life, and there's things you can't. We'll put a link to a picture that I developed around this, which is around the things that are within your span of control and not in your control. And in this case, you have a choice on the things that are controllable. In fact, who's really good at this in the top bubble of excellence is Vincent. He's my son. He's 18. If you ask anybody that knows Vincent, they're going to say, Vincent, he lives a life of excellence. Vincent lives in that top 33%. But how does he do it? He does it with intention, he does it with preparation, and he does it with focus. So Vincent listens to all kinds of motivational videos on YouTube and TikTok, and he posts them on his stories. And then he'll interrupt me in the middle of something I'm quote unquote doing that's important, because he has to show me this thing that he's watching on the internet.
I love that.
Because there's never a perfect time for him, unlike his time. So, whatever's his perfect time, it doesn't matter if it's perfect time for someone else. If he thinks it's impactful, he's going to share it with you. So he listens to these motivational speeches. He says affirmations out loud. He listens to positive music. He tells other people how great they are. He focuses on excellence throughout his day in the moment. And from the moment he wakes up until the moment he goes to sleep, I know that that's an intentional focus that he has. That's how you make your day a masterpiece. Now, before I pause there, I have to say one thing that really has struck me now. Once again, here we are talking about these principles, and I'm looking at the clock, and we have now.
I was just thinking the same thing. We're gonna have to do a third episode on this one.
We are on a marathon.
There are 2 more subsections that we need to talk about. It's investing yourself in others and don't leave anything unsaid, which we both have. I mean, those are so important, and I want to spend a ton of time on that. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, in order to have the most excellent experience, to give it, live in that excellent space, we're gonna have to cut it again and then do a third one. So sorry, Scott. Apologize.
Yes, putting a pin in it.
Gonna have to do some more editing.
This is our marathon of Coach Wooden by Pat Williams.
It's so good. It's so good. And just to wrap up that thought on excellence, like I love that. And as you were telling your stories, the person I thought about was my dad, because he always tells me, he's a real, you accept things as they are. You, it is what it is. What are you going to do about it, right? What attitude can you have? And right, it's that, the things I can control are my attitude on the situation and the effort and the action that I take from there, right? Like, I can hear his voice in my head telling me, life's not fair. And there's been a million times where I could have stepped into complaint and stepped into that attitude of in the bottom 33%, this is a terrible situation. It is what it is. But instead it is what it is. Life is unfair sometimes. But what am I going to do about it? How am I going to move forward? How am I going to step into excellence, even in this situation that's unfair? And so some of that comes with accepting where you are and what you are. And we have to accept that we are out of time. We have to accept that it is. But we're going to have a good attitude. And we're going to cut it off and move us on. And
oh my goodness,
more thoughts next week.
All right. So Sam, we've explored with our listeners now for 2 weeks on making this day your masterpiece. What are you going to do between now and next time to hold yourself accountable to the principles that we shared today?
Oh, today I'm going to look at my distractions and my time wasters. I have a few too many at the moment, so I need to take a log. I need to really focus in on what those things are, because I've come to the end of my days a couple of times recently where it's what did I accomplish? How am I moving towards the goals I'm really clear on? So I'm gonna take a log. I'm gonna look at what I'm doing with my time.
Okay, well, for me, I think I'm going to take the procrastination as well and say that I'm going to spend the next week really trying to dive into another book that I'm almost done with, which is really about how we take the questions that we have in our life and turn them into exclamations and actions in our life. So that'll be my accountability for next time. So at least for today, we've now gone through almost all of this chapter on making this day your masterpiece. We will come back again with you next time. So on behalf of Sam Powell and myself, Denise Russo, thank you so much for joining us on our journey and exploring the books that are on our bookshelves. Have a great day.